Here to provide some insight into the Omicron variant is Dr. Ulysses Wu. He's in charge of infectious diseases at Hartford Healthcare. And Dr. Wu, thanks so much for being with us again.
Thank you for having me again.
First question out there, what exactly is the Omicron variant, and is it more dangerous than the other variants?
So right now, it's a little bit too early to tell whether or not it is more dangerous, and scientists are furiously working to find out exactly what it is. But the Omicron variant, there have probably been a lot more variants that have just been unlabeled. But the last variant of consequence, obviously, is Delta. Omicron is the next one down the line. And the reason they're calling it a variant is due to mutations in some of its cell surface proteins and cell surface structure as well. And so because of that, they're labeling it a variant of concern because some of these may give us the concern that it may be able to evade immunity, medications may not work against it, it may be more virulent, or it may be more transmissible. And so that's why they are labeling it that right now at this point. But the reason I'm not fearful of it just yet, and not that I've been fearful of any of them, but we worry about them. But this one, we're still waiting to find out because right now, there's still a lot of information that needs to be determined about it. And there have been a lot of Greek letters between Omicron and Delta that have not panned out to be more dangerous at this point.
I want to ask you a question that's been asked of me, but I can't answer it as well as you can, certainly. Does the COVID vaccine protect a person against the Omicron variant?
So I'm not sure I can answer that very well either because a little bit is known at this time and a lot still needs to be found out at this point. But so I'm going to talk in global terms with vaccination. It is very unlikely that the vaccine has 0% protection against this variant or any other variant that comes down the road. Because what happens with vaccines, it stimulates other parts of the immune system that will also kick in to try to help and protect you. I think a good example is influenza. Now, it's not the same as the influenza vaccine, but we know that every year the influenza vaccine may not be as efficacious from year to year. But we do know that it is likely that whatever vaccine you got, it will be at least somewhat partially protective. And partial protection against the COVID variants or any COVID virus is better than zero protection.
If Governor Lamont came to you and said, Dr. Wu, how can I best protect Connecticut against Omicron, what would you tell him?
Well, and I'm not saying this just because I'm a Connecticut resident, and I'm not saying this because I'm just on the show, but I think he's actually doing the right thing. People tend to get very complicated in our ways of how to stop this pandemic and how to protect people. And really, there is only two ways about this, short of social distancing and putting yourself in a bunker and not living with anybody, period. But the two ways out of this pandemic are masking and vaccination and boosters as well. And those are two things that he has been promoting at this point.
Do you believe that we should have another mask mandate? Would you recommend that?
So that's a tough question because there is personal choice that is involved in this. But let's go back in the time machine to the time before COVID and all the respiratory viruses that were circulating back then, including the original coronaviruses. So something like influenza. Influenza causes tens of thousands of deaths per year, causes millions of work hours to be lost. It causes, unfortunately, morbidity and mortality, causes hospitalizations. If we wore masks like we did last year and where we basically had almost no influenza, one would argue a mask mandate around this time of the year would actually reduce not just influenza and COVID, but all of the other things, rhinovirus, parainfluenza, adenovirus, all the other circulating respiratory viruses that can kill people.
Dr. Ulysses Wu, he's in charge of infectious diseases at Hartford Healthcare. We thank you so much for being with us here today. I've interviewed you many times over the years, and every time I learned something as I did today. So thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me again.